The room didn't go quiet. It collapsed into silence so heavy it felt like oxygen disappeared. Because the moment that sentence allegedly slipped out, sharp, loaded, impossible to ignore, everything about this story changed. They didn't just get married, he tried to get out. And just like that, the fairy tale everyone thought they understood surrounding Toni Braxton and Birdman cracked wide open, dragging Tamar Braxton right into the center of a storm no one saw coming. Because this wasn't just gossip. This wasn't just family drama. This felt like something hidden finally slipping through the cracks. Overnight, timelines exploded. Old interviews resurfaced. Clips of subtle tension, awkward pauses, and unexplained smiles started circulating like evidence in a case no one knew they were building. And then came the whispers. Allegations that the marriage wasn't as simple as love. That it wasn't as mutual as it appeared. That somewhere between the vows and the silence that followed, something went wrong. Something fast. Something serious. Because according to what's now being whispered in insider circles, Birdman didn't just hesitate. He allegedly tried to walk away before everything became official. Not cold feet. Not nerves. An exit. And what stopped him? That's the question tearing the internet apart right now. Because if Tamar is even partially right, if what she's hinting at has any truth behind it, then this wasn't just a relationship that fell apart. This was a situation that may have been unraveling before it even began. Fans are divided. Some are calling Tamar reckless. Others are calling her the only one brave enough to say what no one else will. Meanwhile, Toni remains silent. Controlled. Unbothered, at least on the surface. And Birdman? Completely quiet. No denial. No clarification. No explanation. Just silence. And that silence. It's not calming anything. It's making everything louder. Because when three people are at the center of a story this explosive, and none of them are telling the same version, you don't get clarity. You get questions. And right now, there's one question that refuses to go away. If this marriage was real, why did it feel like someone was trying to escape it? The first crack didn't come from a headline. It came from a moment so small, most people missed it. A pause. A hesitation. A look that didn't match the story being told. And according to insiders circling the situation, that moment happened before the wedding was even finalized. Because while the public believed Toni Braxton and Birdman were stepping into a love story years in the making, something very different was allegedly unfolding behind closed doors. Something tense. Something rushed. Something that didn't feel like two people walking toward the same future. It started with whispers about timing. Not romantic timing. Legal timing. One insider claims there were conversations happening just days before the ceremony that didn't sound like wedding planning. They sounded like negotiation. Documents being discussed. Deadlines being mentioned. Questions being asked that didn't feel emotional, they felt strategic. And that's when the first alarm bells started ringing for Tamar Braxton. Because Tamar, according to sources, wasn't just watching from the sidelines. She was asking questions no one else wanted to ask. Why does this feel rushed? She allegedly said during a private family moment. No one answered her directly. But the silence said everything. Then came the night that changed everything. The night insiders now refer to as the almost exit. According to someone who claims to have been present, Birdman didn't just express doubt. He allegedly tried to stop everything. Not dramatically. Not publicly. But quietly. Carefully. Like someone trying to back out of something before it became irreversible. He wasn't yelling, the source said. He was asking questions. The kind of questions you ask when you realize you might be in too deep. Questions like, what exactly had been filed? What was already official? What could still be undone? And most importantly, what happens if I don't go through with this? Those questions didn't sound like cold feet. They sounded like someone trying to find an exit. But according to insiders, that exit didn't come. Because the moment Birdman started pulling back, the energy in the room allegedly shifted. Toni didn't panic. She didn't plead. She didn't cry. She stayed calm. Too calm, according to Tamar. And that calmness, it's what Tamar can't let go of. Because from her perspective, it didn't feel like a woman afraid of losing love. It felt like someone who had already calculated the outcome. That's when Tamar allegedly stepped in. And what was supposed to be a private conversation turned into something much bigger. Voices raised. Tension exploded. And one question that insiders say Tamar asked, directly, without hesitation, cut through the entire situation. Why does this feel like a deal instead of a marriage? That question reportedly froze the room. Because it wasn't just about Birdman anymore. It was about intent. About motive. About whether this relationship was built on love, or something else entirely. Toni didn't answer. Not in that moment. She just looked at Tamar. And according to multiple sources, that look said more than words ever could. Because Tamar interpreted it as confirmation. Not of wrongdoing. But of something being off. Something unspoken. Something no one was willing to admit out loud. The next day, everything moved forward anyway. The ceremony happened. The vows were said. And to the outside world, it looked like another chapter in a complicated but enduring love story. But inside, according to insiders, nothing felt settled. Nothing felt secure. And Tamar knew it. She said it didn't feel real, one source claimed. Like everyone was playing a role instead of living a moment. Then came the aftermath. And that's where things get even more unsettling. Because the timeline that shocked the public, the rapid shift from marriage to separation, wasn't shocking to everyone inside the family. Some people, according to insiders, were already bracing for it. Because if Birdman had already tried to step back before the wedding, then what happened next wasn't a surprise. It was a continuation. The separation didn't come out of nowhere. It came from something that had already started. Something that never fully resolved. And Tamar? She was watching all of it unfold in real time. But the moment that pushed her over the edge didn't come from the marriage. It came from a conversation that happened after everything started falling apart. A conversation between Tamar and Birdman that insiders describe as short, tense, and revealing. According to one source, Birdman didn't explain everything. He didn't accuse. He didn't go into detail. But he said one sentence that Tamar hasn't been able to shake since. "This isn't what I thought it was." That line changed everything. Because it suggested misunderstanding. Expectation versus reality. And possibly a situation that didn't unfold the way one side believed it would. Tamar took that sentence personally. Not as gossip. Not as drama. But as a warning sign. Because if someone enters a marriage thinking one thing, and realizes something completely different after it's already happened, that's not just miscommunication. That's something deeper. Something more complicated. And possibly something that was never fully transparent to begin with. Meanwhile, the internet began catching on. Clips resurfaced. Moments were reanalyzed. Fans started noticing things they hadn't noticed before. The speed. The silence. The lack of explanation. And most importantly, The lack of alignment between the people involved. Because while Toni remained composed and Birdman remained silent, Tamar's energy started shifting. Subtle at first, then more noticeable. Comments that felt indirect but pointed. Statements about relationships, control, and timing that seemed too specific to be random. And fans noticed. Because when Tamar starts speaking in layers, it usually means there's more underneath. But the biggest twist, it hadn't come out yet. Because according to one insider, Tamar wasn't just reacting to what she saw. She was reacting to something she was told. Something about what really happened the night Birdman tried to walk away. Something that explains why the wedding still happened, even after everything started falling apart. And if that detail ever becomes public, it won't just change how people see the marriage. It will change how they see everyone involved. The second wave didn't hit with noise. It tightened like a vice. Because by now, the story wasn't about whether something felt off. It was about why it felt off, and who knew it first. And that's when everything started pointing back to Tamar Braxton. Not as the cause, but as the one who allegedly saw it coming before anyone else was willing to say it out loud. Because according to insiders, Tamar didn't just question the situation before the wedding. She confronted it after. Directly. Emotionally. And in a way that no one in that family could ignore. It reportedly happened within 48 hours of the ceremony. The energy had already shifted. The silence between Toni Braxton and Birdman had become noticeable, even to people outside their inner circle. No celebratory posts. No shared excitement. Just distance. And Tamar wasn't having it. According to a source who claims to have been present, Tamar pulled Toni aside during a private moment that quickly turned into something much bigger. What really happened? She allegedly asked. Not gently. Not casually. But with the kind of urgency that comes from knowing something doesn't add up. Toni didn't answer right away. And that hesitation, it lit a fuse. Because Tamar wasn't asking for reassurance. She was asking for truth. And when the truth didn't come quickly enough, the conversation escalated. Voices raised. Emotions spilled. And what started as concern turned into confrontation. You knew he wasn't ready, Tamar reportedly said. That line hit hard. Because it wasn't a question. It was an accusation. And according to insiders, Toni didn't deny it. She redirected. She defended. She reframed. But she didn't outright say Tamar was wrong. And that silence, it was enough. Because for Tamar, that moment confirmed everything she had been feeling from the beginning. That something about this marriage wasn't mutual. Wasn't aligned. Wasn't fully chosen by both sides. Meanwhile, outside the family, the internet was starting to catch up. Because as rumors of tension began leaking, fans did what they always do. They went back. Back to interviews. Back to appearances. Back to every public moment between Toni and Birdman that now felt different. One clip went viral almost instantly. Birdman standing next to Toni, smiling, but not fully engaged. Nodding. Listening. But not matching her energy. At the time, it looked normal. Now, it looked like someone going through the motions. And that clip alone sparked a wave of speculation that couldn't be contained. Because once people start reinterpreting the past, the present becomes impossible to trust. Then came the alleged text leak. A screenshot, unverified but widely circulated, claiming to show a message from Birdman to someone in his circle just hours before the wedding. I'm not sure about this. That was it. No context. No follow-up. But those 5 words. They detonated everything. Because if true, even partially, it means the doubt wasn't sudden. It was already there. Already present. Already building. And yet, the wedding still happened. That contradiction is what Tamar reportedly couldn't understand. Because in her mind, if someone isn't sure, you don't move forward. You stop. You wait. You figure it out. But according to what she believes, and what insiders are now hinting at, that didn't happen. Instead, the situation moved forward anyway. And that's where the story takes its most unsettling turn. Because multiple sources now claim that the moment Birdman tried to step back, the conversation shifted from emotional to practical. Not "do you love me?" but "we've already come this far." Not "are you ready?" but "this is already in motion." And that shift is what Tamar allegedly saw as the biggest red flag of all. Because once a relationship starts sounding like a commitment that has to happen instead of one that's freely chosen, everything changes. Meanwhile, the fallout inside the family was getting worse. Because Tamar wasn't just questioning Toni privately anymore. She was speaking more openly, still indirectly, but with enough clarity that people knew exactly what she was referring to. Comments about pressure. About timing. About how some decisions are made out of fear instead of love. And every time she spoke, the tension grew. Because Toni, according to insiders, felt attacked. Not just as a partner, but as a woman. As someone who had made a decision she believed was right for her life. And Tamar's interpretation felt like a public unraveling of that choice. The sisters reportedly had another confrontation, this time even more intense than the first. Toni accused Tamar of trying to control the narrative. Tamar accused Toni of ignoring the reality. Neither backed down. Neither softened. And by the end of that conversation, something had shifted permanently. Because this wasn't just about a marriage anymore. It was about trust. And whether that trust still existed between them. Meanwhile, Birdman remained exactly where he had been from the beginning of this storm. Silent. Completely. No clarification. No defense. No denial. And that silence. It started to feel intentional. Because the longer he said nothing, the more space there was for speculation to grow. And that speculation was getting louder by the day. Then came the most explosive claim yet. An insider close to the situation posted a cryptic message that instantly went viral. He tried to leave twice. Twice. Not once. Not a moment of hesitation. But multiple attempts to step back before everything became official. If that claim is true, even partially, then this wasn't just doubt. It was resistance. And that changes everything. Because now the question isn't just why the marriage ended so quickly. It's why it happened at all. And Tamar, according to sources, believes she knows the answer. But she hasn't said it. Not fully. Not publicly. Because the detail she's holding back, the one she's only shared with a small circle, is the piece that connects everything. The hesitation. The pressure. The sudden shift from wedding to separation. And if that piece ever comes out, it won't just explain what happened. It will expose why no one has been willing to tell the full story. The third wave didn't explode. It settled like a truth people didn't want, but couldn't ignore anymore. Because by now, the noise had faded just enough for something more dangerous to take its place. Realization. Not confirmation. Not proof. But the quiet understanding that whatever happened between Toni Braxton, Birdman, and Tamar Braxton was never as simple as it looked. And that realization changed everything. Because once the emotional chaos cooled, people started focusing on what hadn't been said. No documents. No clear timeline. No detailed explanation from anyone involved. Just fragments. Silence. And a story that didn't fully align. And that's where the weight of it all began to sink in. Because when a marriage happens quickly, ends even faster, and no one involved rushes to explain why, it doesn't just raise questions. It creates them. Meanwhile, insiders began shifting their tone. Less dramatic. More reflective. As if even they realized this wasn't a story that could be fully exposed without consequences. One source put it bluntly. Everybody knows something. Nobody wants to say everything. That line spread quietly, but powerfully. Because it explained the silence. Not as avoidance, but as containment. Containment of details that could hurt, damage, or permanently fracture what's left of the relationships involved. And that's when Tamar's role in all of this started to look different. Not as the instigator, not as the disruptor, but as the one standing closest to the edge of a truth she's not fully ready to release. Because according to people close to her, Tamar doesn't believe her sister is malicious. She believes she was scared. Scared of losing control. Scared of being alone. Scared of another chapter ending before it ever really began. And that fear may have shaped decisions that looked like certainty from the outside, but felt like urgency on the inside. That perspective changed how some fans viewed the situation. Because it removed the idea of a villain and replaced it with something far more complicated. Human behavior under pressure. Meanwhile, Toni's silence continued, but it started to feel less like mystery and more like intention. Because speaking now wouldn't just clarify things. It would open everything. Every detail. Every assumption. Every private moment that's currently protected by ambiguity. And maybe that's why she hasn't said anything. Because once you explain a story like this, you can't control how it's interpreted. And control, according to many watching, is a theme that runs through this entire situation. Then there's Birdman. Still silent. Still distant. Still not offering a version of events that could either confirm or dismantle everything being said. And that silence has become its own kind of answer. Not a confirmation, but a refusal. A refusal to participate in a narrative that's already spiraled beyond what anyone involved can fully manage. And that refusal has created a strange kind of balance. Because as long as he says nothing, the story remains incomplete, unfinished, unresolved. And maybe that's exactly where it's safest to keep it. Meanwhile, the internet has shifted again. Less chaos. More curiosity. People aren't arguing as aggressively anymore. They are thinking. Rewatching. Reconsidering. Because the deeper you look at this story, the harder it becomes to simplify. It's not just about a marriage. It's about timing, expectation, communication, and the dangerous space between what someone thinks they are agreeing to and what actually unfolds. And that's where Tamar's final alleged statement, shared privately, not publicly, hits the hardest. According to an insider, she said, "Some people don't say no because they can't. They say yes because they don't know how to say no." That line changed everything. Because it reframes the entire situation. Not as deception. Not as manipulation. But as a moment where two people may have been operating from completely different understandings of the same decision. One thinking it was commitment. The other realizing it was too much, too fast, too final. And by the time that realization happened, it was already too late. That perspective doesn't solve the mystery, but it softens it. It shifts the focus away from blame and toward misalignment. And misalignment, especially at that level, doesn't need villains. It just needs timing and pressure and a decision that moves faster than clarity. Now, as the story settles into its final phase, one truth remains impossible to ignore. This wasn't a marriage that failed. It was a situation that may have never fully aligned from the beginning. And the reason it ended so quickly might be because the reality finally caught up with the expectation. But the most important detail, the one Tamar hasn't said out loud, still hangs in the air. Because until that final piece is revealed, this story will never feel complete. Only understood in fragments. And maybe that's how it will stay. Because some truths don't explode when they come out. They linger. And once they linger, they change how everything is remembered. If you've stayed with this story all the way to the end, then you already know, this wasn't just another headline you scroll past and forget. This was layered, emotional, uncomfortable. Because what we just walked through isn't only about Toni Braxton, Tamar Braxton, or Birdman. It's about what happens when love, pressure, timing, and expectations collide in ways no one fully understands until it's too late. And now, the biggest question isn't what was said. It's what wasn't. So I need you to do something right now. Drop your real opinion in the comments. Do you think this was a misunderstanding that spiraled out of control? Or do you believe there's still a deeper truth being protected behind all that silence? Don't just scroll past. This is one of those stories where every perspective adds something new. And if you've been following closely, you already know this isn't over. Not even close. Because all it takes is one statement, one interview, or one leaked detail, and everything we think we know could flip overnight. So make sure you like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because when the next piece of this story drops, you do not want to hear it secondhand. Stay locked in. Because this situation, it's still unfolding.